Welcome to our Week 8 Chicago Bears postgame show as the Bears fell to the New Orleans Saints 26-23 in overtime in a game that, even though it was close here at the final moments, I was personally having myself a little bit of doubts that the Bears would find a way to pull this one out, to say the least. I'm Eros Littlewit. Joining with me is my co-host Nicholas Moriano. The two of us were here to give you our instant analysis, reaction, and takeaway of this Chicago Bears loss as the Bears fall to now 5-3 on the year. Nick, as we kind of just kick off this post-game show, I want to know how you're feeling. I know we're trying to figure out when that Javon Wims brawl kind of happened here in this game, and I told you I thought it happened in the first half. You're like, I thought it was in the second. Found out it happened almost midway through the third quarter, which almost feels like a lifetime ago as of right now. But how you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when that all happened, Will, it kind of just threw me off in this game. Just seeing something as malicious as what Wims did, trying to, again, maybe defend a teammate for what was happening in a couple of plays previous. I get that, but you just can't do what he did. But, yeah, just a lot. We saw a lot of the same issues on the offense, and we'll get into it. But the Bears lost. You can't be in that good of a mood. It was a close game score-wise, 26-23, right? But it just didn't feel that way. And I'm sure as we go through this conversation, we'll go into the why. We'll solve the why that Matt Nagy can never solve. So we'll get into it. And, yeah, just not feeling good, though.
No, we'll talk about everything. But, Nick, one thing that really kind of stuck with me throughout the majority of this game was something that you mentioned in our preview, was that this Bears defense almost needs to play a perfect game for this Bears team to win. Do you still feel that way after today? I mean, I felt like the Bears offense definitely squandered some opportunities here late. Overtime is an obvious late squander, but I felt like, holding the Saints to 26, even though it's a little bit more than we're used to seeing teams score against us, and the Bears offense found some ways to score some points. I thought what you told me in the preview show kept just coming back into my head, like, you're right. Like, any mistake by this Bears defense was magnified more than any other defense that I feel like I've ever seen play the game of football before. And then also every mistake this offense makes, it too is it's not good to say the least. And I'm struggling to find a way to be very poetic with my words, but sometimes it's a little bit more than that.
No, well, I mean, I was having that conversation with my dad. It's like he kept saying, like, the defense is playing good. The defense is playing good, and they're playing well enough for the Bears to win. But you see this offense go out there and do what they do, and like you said, squander away opportunities. That's exactly what they did. You give the Bears defense to any other team, and they're like, wow, how can't you win with this? Like, this is a great unit that's going to not bend, not break. And we saw a couple of those plays that we'll get when we talk to defense, but still they played well enough to win this game. And the offense, time and time again, just kept making those same mistakes to where it didn't even matter how good they were playing, and they're going to give up plays. They're not a perfect unit. Like, they can't be a lead on every single drive, but they're pretty close to it sometimes, and they still come away with losses, which is so frustrating as a Bears fan. I'm sure it's just a team to see that kind of wasted effort go into the loss column.
I'm frustrated, Nick. Are you frustrated?
Oh, absolutely. Will. I mean, this is a game that I had them losing, so I guess I win in that regard, right? In the little bet that we have, and I was actually worried about that. I thought about that mid game, like, Will's onto something. But of course I am. This was a winnable game, and the Saints were a beatable team, and the Bears obviously came out on the wrong end here, and could have, with Green Bay losing too. This would have been a huge opportunity for the Bears to just take a one-up in the NFC and the NFC North, but they failed to do that tonight.
2 weeks in a row, Nick. 2 weeks in a row, the Bears had an opportunity to not just extend a lead or really proclaim that they can lead this division, and they fall short, which as a fan is disheartening. But let's go ahead and let's jump into our first quarter of the show. Let's talk about our monster moments of the game. And in a game like this, Nick, there's a lot of little areas you can probably nitpick at. For me, though, I think the biggest moment of the game has to come in overtime with this Bears offense. Defense starts overtime. They get a stop. Bears offense comes out. They get a 3rd and 15 conversion. Luckily, there was a penalty on New Orleans that was declined, but really the big one was Foles to A-Rob for 17 yards on that 3rd and 15. After the fact, you have 2 incomplete passes in a row. 3rd and 10 at our own 31. Nick Foles gets sacked, having to punt that thing away. And after that point, it really was all Saints from there. 7 plays, 52 yards. And, of course, the game-winning field goal. But for the Bears in overtime on offense, Nick, to go 6 plays, 8 yards, 3 minutes off the clock to go 8 yards. To me, again, there are some really good plays, and I'll talk about them on each side of the ball as we kind of go through this post-game show. But with the game on the line, with it tied up at 23, you have the ball. The defense did its job to kind of kick off overtime because you lose the toss. And for the offense to just go as flat as they did, as quickly as they did, to pretty much go from 1st and 10 to 3rd and 10 to 4th and 14 in a matter of, again, 3 minutes, and you gain 8 yards. To me, the offense had a chance to win the game. They didn't need to score a touchdown. Santos was kicking really well this entire game despite the weather, and they couldn't do anything. So for me, again, maybe not the biggest moment, like wow, but like for me, biggest moment in terms of you had the game in your hand, in your grasp, and they just found a way to kind of squander it, which I think squander, it's going to be my word at the post-game show. I feel like we always have one or two that kind of stick with us. That's going to be mine, no doubt about it. But that's going to be my monster moment of the game. Where are you looking, Nick? Again, I thought there were some other really good moments, but when you look at how this game was playing out, that's an opportunity that they kind of just let fall to the wayside that it's going to have me probably staying up tonight a little later than I like.
Yeah, and with this, Will, I don't know, for the last week I kind of chose a positive one, but for me, seeing that 51-yard field goal going for Cairo Santos after he was iced the first time, Sean Payton calls a timeout, and then seeing him nail it. And we both had similar kind of tweets. I think like clutch or ice in his veins, like that whole aspect to it. It gave the Bears an opportunity, the opportunity that you were just talking about that they squandered away, that he made that field goal to even put them in that position. So I'll go there because you knew the Bears, if whatever the coin toss was, if the Bears defense was going to get it, at least there was going to be an opportunity. I knew that. I just felt like there was going to be, given how they were playing today, even though they had given up some touchdown drives. That happens. But I knew the Bears offense would get an opportunity, and it all starts with that Cairo Santos 51-yard field goal. So I'll go with that. It doesn't obviously leads the Bears to get to that opportunity. Doesn't result in the win, obviously, but then it goes right into your monster moment. Those next couple of plays for bad drops and just wasting opportunities to really capitalize on what the defense had given them. And it's unfortunate, Will. It really is.
Yeah, you had a chance. And, Nick, we usually can easily put the blame on offense, but that's like a clear-cut way to do so. Probably more than some of the other games this season. We'll talk about the offense, the ups, the downs, and everything in between here in just a little moment. But first, I do need to let you know that our monster moment of the game is brought to you by our friends over at Miller Lite, and it's always Miller time in Chicago. And no, I'm not talking about Zach Miller scaring Mitchell Trubisky on Halloween. The Bears and Miller Lite, they are two iconic parts of Chicago and go together just naturally. So even if there are no fans today at Soldier Field, don't forget, it's still Miller time. And since you can't be at the field, I'm curious, where do you find yourself enjoying Miller time during a game? Is it your man cave, your living room, out in the garage? For me, it's my living room. I know, Nick, right now for you, it's the same. But however you're watching the game, it's always better with a Miller Lite, which is the only beer of the Chicago Bears. So here's to the Bears. Here's to the original light beer. It's Miller time. No matter where you're watching the game, it's always Miller time in Chicago. Pick up a Miller Lite for your game day needs. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. Alrighty, you're listening to the Chicago Audible. This is our Week 8 post-game show. Bears fall to the Saints 26-23 in overtime. And we're going to jump right into the second quarter of our post-game show, which is a discussion all about the Chicago Bears offense. And Nick, early on in this game, we lost Bobby Massey, so you're down 60% of your starting offensive line that we began the season with. We did have some very valid concerns with this unit heading into the game. And before we dive into all the specifics and everything of that nature, just to kind of open things off, did they play better than you thought they would in general before we kind of start, I would say, ripping them apart for some of the other issues that we did see? Because for me, as much as we were worried about this offensive line, and then Bobby Massey goes down, and my worry level went up another, not tenfold, but another degree. I thought they moved the ball more than I was anticipating. But did they exceed your expectations too? I know you had the Bears losing, but I'm curious if that's the case or not.
Yeah, I would say so. Will, when you have Rashad Coward at one point in the game playing right tackle because the backup right tackle gets injured, and then you have Alex Barr, there's a whole shift in this whole entire offensive line. At this point, you're thinking, how is Nick Foles going to even have the opportunity to throw a pass? But he had time at times to actually throw, and David Montgomery was still working for a lot of his yards. But I think with given all the backups and how bad they had played in the past couple of weeks, they did exceed my expectations. That's not a high bar to set. Let's just establish that. It's not a high bar to set, but they did play better than what I was seeing. You look at the names on that front five, you're thinking the worst is going to come. This is going to be the worst blocking that we've seen all season, but that wasn't really the case. There was obviously still some bad moments, but I will agree with you, Will. They did exceed my expectations. Not a high bar, though.
No, and that's the sad part, where you can set the bar so low, and they play as average as they did today, and it felt like a pretty proficient offensive attack. And I think that's probably the biggest issue that I'm seeing so far. Again, this defense from the Saints entered the game the 29th defense on third down. The Bears, of course, were pretty poor on their own end, and the Bears found a way to convert on 33% of their third downs, which is not good, to say the least. That's still very far down the barrel for the NFL in terms of just general averages. And then in terms of just getting into the red zone, the Bears were at 50%. But I think the bigger problem is that they ran only 3 less plays than New Orleans. They ran 69 plays compared to the Saints 72. But they only found the red zone half the time. The Bears found themselves inside the 20 twice, compared to the New Orleans Saints finding themselves inside the 24 times in this game. Nick, for me, it was one of those where I thought I saw some good things from this offense from time to time, whether it be early on in this game when you have a 3rd and 8 and you're able to pick it up rushing the ball, which was a great counter. I think everyone and their mother thought the Bears were going to pass that one. They actually handed it off to Montgomery, was able to kind of offset that obvious passing down, get a first down. Very first play of the game, they kind of ran a heavy set too. And I was like, oh yeah, easily. The Bears are going to start this thing with a run, and they actually passed it. So they tried to break some tendencies. They did some motion, some misdirection that we've been kind of missing on this offense that we saw the Rams do really well last week. What are some of the good things that you saw from this Bears offense? Because to me, there were some items. It's hard, though, because I do take it with a grain of salt, just knowing how poor this Saints defense has been in terms of keeping teams out of the red zone, scoring in the red zone, and really, in particular, third down. Again, the Saints defense on third down, 3rd worst in the NFL entering the week, and the Bears really couldn't capitalize on that as much as I was hoping. Again, you see what the Bears were able to do on third down. There were a few really good conversions, which got me excited. And then I checked my notes and kind of remember, and it dawns on me like, oh, this Saints defense hasn't been good on third down all season long. But as we kind of get into this offense discussion, let's start with the positive before we start looking at some of the perhaps negatives.
Yeah, so I think looking at positives from this offense, and surprisingly there are some, which we couldn't have said just a couple of weeks ago, but I just look at the first drive, how they even handle that. It ends in a field goal, but what they were doing, and you mentioned it, Will, a lot of that motion, that misdirection, and even some hurry up tempo things, you can build off of that and utilize that into, each drive, not just on one where then you eventually get away from it, but those kind of elements, I think right now for this Bears team, yes, they still struggle at times to even get lined up correctly, and they have still delay games. And we'll talk about Nick Foles in a little bit, but I think those kind of elements that you could sprinkle into an offensive game plan need to be there more often. We saw it just on the first drive, and I really like seeing that. And, we were tweeting at each other, Will, saying, hey, they learned from the Rams. Well, yeah, they did. And you should, because they run, I think, a good scheme. And they're just a little bit more explosive plays in this one as well. You think of the Darnell Mooney play, the touchdown to Allen Robinson, the big run by David Montgomery. So these explosive plays that also weren't there. So, and you got to set those up. And tempo, misdirection, play action are things to do that. And they're doing that with a put together offensive line. So I'll give Nagy some credit there for being able to kind of switch it up a little bit. But those are definitely things I want to continue to see. Not just this game plan against the Saints that we see on the other side are doing a lot of the same things and having success, put up 26 points, right? So if we could see more of those types of plays. I love when Mooney goes from the left side of the field, motions right, he's out in the flat. That's 7 to 8 yards, like almost every time. He's
easy money.
Open. It's easy plays. So things like that, Will, I like. They could build off, and you could take this throughout a season, and maybe Will develop an identity. Who knows? But that might be far out of the equation at this point. But those are things that I did like seeing from the Bears offense throughout the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. That one drive that the Bears had there in the first half where they went pretty much the length of the field, it felt like. But it was a touchdown drive and 75 yards, and it didn't take them many plays to get it done. I mean, it was...
The 4-play drive, 80-yard 80-yard drive?
4 plays, 80-yard drives. You hit the bomb to Mooney. You run it with Monty. You hit A-Rob in the end zone. And that's a drive that gets me excited about what kind of day we could have in store here for the Bears. It was like, oh, cool. We actually can have explosive plays. Like, we have not seen those at all. And I love the Bears' mentality to push it deep downfield. And Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like the Bears were trying to do a few more of those as the game kind of wore on. But it was really the offensive line's inability to kind of hold that pocket to allow Foles to kind of allow some of those plays to develop. Is that your assessment as well? Again, the game just ended as we're doing this post game. We can't watch the all-22, but it seemed like he was holding onto the ball. I mean, he was sacked 5 times today, trying to allow something to happen downfield that just wasn't able to develop. And again, you're down 60% of your offensive line, which sounds like an excuse. Perhaps it is an excuse, but really at the end of the day, it's just reality.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that, Will. But there are also sometimes I think it was the last, maybe the second to last sack that Nick Foles took, where the Fox pregame they were or the Fox postgame, like they were showing the replay of it, right? And Darnell Mooney's the target, Nick Foles holding on, but it's never there. It's never there because the safety's over the top, and if Nick Foles even attempts to throw, that should have been what his third interception. He had an interception dropped in this game, but. Yes, majority of those are just it's a makeshift offensive line. Will they can't block guys like Cameron Jordan, Marcus Davenport for that long to where they're going to eventually hit home. So yeah, that's the problem that Matt Nagy has to deal with, and it's not easy for sure. But doing what we were just talking about, some of those positives can help to get overcome the obviously deficient offensive line that they currently have right now.
Yeah, and we need to talk about the third quarter when it comes to this Bears offense because it's still just so bad. And I need your take here because you start off the third quarter, you get the ball. You go 5 plays, and you do gain a first down, but then things kind of go backwards, whether it's a penalty or a Nick Foles sack. But 5 plays, 0 yards. You do take 4 minutes off the clock, but you go nowhere. After that fact, the Saints were able to get a field goal. Bears get the ball back right away. Interception. Saints get another field goal. Bears get the ball back on offense. 3 plays, 3 yards, and you punt. You turn it over on downs. It's just, again, after the halftime break, it really feels like the Bears are just at a severe disadvantage. You go from a 13-10 lead at half, and before the Bears can even blink, it's 23-13. Saints were putting up, again, 13 unanswered points. Did you feel like the Bears were outplayed in the third quarter in terms of either being outcoached or just, honestly just outperformed on the field as well? I know this is the same quarter that had the Javon Wims scuffle, which still kind of, it irritates me. He was my X factor, and you also had Anthony Miller, who was your X factor, and I think you did a much better job of figuring out which receiver was going to stand up. Of course, Allen Robinson was able to play, and when we did our preview show, neither of us knew if he was going to play or not. I think we're both very elated that he was, and we'll talk about his game here in a little bit, but When it comes to the Bears' inability to do anything in the third quarter, which is nothing new to us this season, did you feel like this was yet another game where Matt Nagy was just out-coached, outmanned here in after halftime? Because to me, it really felt like it.
And it's felt like that all season, Will. It was recently where they actually scored their first points in the third quarter. I'm forgetting what team that actually was against because it hasn't happened very often, but that's what seems to be the commonality. When the Bears come out of halftime, I think their defense, look, they've been a little bit more prone to give up some points in that third quarter, but they're still playing far, far better than what the offense is doing. And I have in my notes here, the first drive, that delay a game, 3rd and 4. And that's on Nick Foles. That's on the offense. It's like, you can't have that. Like these things out of halftime, we're trying to build a drive together, and it's these dumb little plays that set you back. We've talked so many times, Will, where you get this Bears team behind the chains, and if you put it 3rd and 4 and then have to delay a game, you're putting yourself in a position to punt the ball, right after that. And then the Foles takes a sack on the now 3rd and long play. So it's like these kind of things, and coming out of halftime where you're obviously not adjusting to what the defense is now doing, and that's on Matt Nagy. That's on Matt Nagy. That's all in coaching. That's why. And Nick Foles taking a delay a game. He's a veteran, and so it's a lot of things that are going into these third quarters and not starting off hot. Actually, it's so ironic because that used to be in 2018 what the Bears are actually good at. They used to come out the third quarters hot. In 2019, 2020 have not been the same result. But yeah, I would definitely put it to coaching and just execution and simple mistakes from individual players, whether it's a Nick Foles not recognizing the play clock's expiring or Javon Williams taking a cheap shot on a player and putting themselves in a bad position. So bunch of bad individual mistakes by a lot of people, coaches and players.
And again, we talked about it in a preview, and you made a really good point where this defense needs to play almost perfect game to win. And in that third quarter, the Bears gave up 6 points on 26 yards allowed. Yes, I don't know what more you can ask from your defense to holding Drew Brees and the Saints offense to 26 total yards on 2 separate drives. And both of those ended up in a field goal. We have 4 plays, 7 yards, and then another 8-play drive that only went 19 yards. And again, there are some other drives, and we'll talk about the Bears defense in a bit, but that's in the third quarter with this Bears offense, as I mentioned, not doing anything to help the Bears. And the third phase didn't help with that long punt return as well. Followed that up with the Nick Foles interception. But again, whenever you're allowing just minimal yardage and you're able to come away with points in offense, you're going to take that as a win. And going up against a Bears offense that has such a difficult time scoring points itself, I think that almost gets exponentially a little bit more, favorable in terms of those opposing offenses. So let's talk about Nick Foles. He was 28 of 41, same amount of passing attempts as Drew Brees, 3 less attempts, 2 touchdowns today, only 1 interception. He was sacked 5 times today. Offensive line wasn't really his best friend, which isn't really anything new. How would you assess the play from the quarterback?
Man, this is tough for me, Will, because I think at one point I would just say it's another Nick Foles game where it's up and down. Streaky is the word when Nick Foles is streaky. That there's no better word to really describe him and how he plays this game. And so I'll start off with the negative. I am so tired, Will, of seeing those terrible interceptions. He's had one almost in every single game he started, every single game he's played in, right? Where you're just questioning why. And especially because of who he is, a veteran player that's been through this many, many times. And yes, he has a bad offensive line in front of him. He hasn't had the continuity with his receivers like he would have liked to going into a season. But the decisions are his own, and the decisions are really, really bad. And that interception wasn't even close to Jimmy Graham, who wasn't running very good routes all game, but still doesn't matter. The ball was nowhere near him. And I'm really tired of seeing that, Will. He's supposed to be a guy that was supposed to come in and not make those types of plays, the same plays that Mitch Trubisky would make. He's doing that too. The delay of games, like I was mentioning earlier, where that's on him trying to get his offensive line. This is before the headset went out too. So that's just on him not recognizing the play clock. There's no one else in the stadium. You're at home. Why are those problems still happening? That irks me. It just does not sit well with me at all, Will. But then there are the plays where he is hitting, where it can only be in one spot. The touchdown, Allen Robinson, it's a hell of a catch by Robinson, but that's good placement. And the Darnell Mooney deep throw, Mitch Trubisky most likely doesn't make that play because he just hasn't been able to hit a deep ball, but Nick Foles made it. So good, the bad, it's just another game from Nick Foles and another game where the Bears didn't come out on top with them.
I feel like with the Bears quarterback situation, it's what do you want to be your saving grace versus what do you want to be your poison? There are definitely a few plays out there today where I feel like Trubisky makes it where Nick Foles does not. But as you just said, Nick, there are some other plays that's the complete opposite. And unfortunately, I think for both of us, there are plays where no matter who's under center, we're probably expecting more or less the same kind of outcome. So for me, when it came to Nick Foles, like you, frustrated with the turnover. Like you, it feels like we're seeing the same thing every week where there's like one of those throws where as soon as it leaves his hands, you're like, oh yeah, that's going the other direction. And it does, and it's not even that close. And then on the other side, there are a few throws that get you really excited, whether it be the Mooney deep shot, the Allen Robinson touchdown, a few of those balls to Miller as well for some of those first downs throughout this game, get you really excited, but they can't find a way to build off of those. It's like, cool, we had a really good throw and catch or two, and we're going to forget about those, and we're going to look forward, look elsewhere, and we're not going to be able to build any momentum off of them. So for me, as great as some of the positives are and as low as some of the negatives are, I would love to find some middle ground. Even if it's just a consistent, even keel, slightly above average. Is that asking too much play out of my quarterback in Chicago? Probably. But that's what I wish that we could find a way to get out of here from Nick Foles. Again, it's something where I know he doesn't have much of an offensive line, but as much as that aggravates me, and I'm sure it aggravates you, there are a few of those plays when he takes sacks or if he just kind of tries to buy time and he doesn't have that same mobility as number 10. You kind of wish you do have Mitch out there who could buy a little bit of extra time, but at the same time, on top of that, who knows if Mitch can still execute and deliver on a throw after the fact. So no matter how you slice it, it's not an ideal quarterback situation.
What do you think, Will, of seeing Mitch Trubisky?
I loved it. I loved it. I missed him. I mean, when I was typing in a few of my notes, and then I heard the cadence, and I was like, that's Mitch. And I look up, and I'm like, hey, it is. And, he was able to run it. Game. Yeah, hey, you know what? At the time, it was like one of our better runs of the game. And I was like, okay, if that's what it's going to take, so be it. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit here on the podcast. That wouldn't be something we'd be completely opposed to. But, of course, if you expose Mitch to that degree, then you're looking at maybe Tyler Bray's your backup, which is not an ideal situation for everyone as well. But I wouldn't be opposed to the Bears. I'm surprised we didn't see it more throughout this game, honestly. They tried it once, and they didn't try it yet again. But I don't know, Nick, how about you? I mean, I admittedly had a smile on my face when I saw number 10 out there.
Oh, yeah. I yelled out, Trubisky's in the game, watching with the family and my girlfriend. They're like, wait, what's going on? I'm like, it's just, probably going to be a design run or an option. And it was. And then he goes off. And, yeah, it was nice to see him, though. He's been through a lot. And you would think, look, this Bears offense isn't good. Why not sprinkle in some plays where he's out there? Like, we've seen it before when Trubisky was the starter with Chase Daniel. Like, Nagy's run some of those kind of plays. You could sprinkle that in. Look, the Saints, they do the exact same thing with Taysom Hill, and he's a very athletic guy, and he's can clearly play receiver too, the way he ran that post pattern. So, but you never know. Why not just utilize all the guys you got?
I mean, I thought about it when I was coaching middle school earlier this fall, when I had a little bit of a quarterback conundrum on my hands, and even then, it comes to leadership as well, which is very unique to this position out of all sports. Like, you can't really run a dual system if you don't want to have some of the leadership that kind of go to the straight, which is, again, to me, is fascinating. And I would love to look into the psychology behind that. But it would be interesting if they can find a way to get Mitch more on the field. Looking at just some of the passing game in general, Allen Robinson, he caught 6 balls, 7 targets, 87 yards, that big touchdown as we mentioned. On top of that, Darnell Mooney had 69 yards on 5 catches. But really, for me, Nick, there's someone. Okay, so Mooney and Robinson. Robinson, thank God he was able to play. Really needed him here today. He came up with some big catches. including the score. Darnell Mooney, he had his biggest catch, the 50-yarder. Outside of that, a few smaller catches underneath. But your X factor, and that's Anthony Miller. 8 catches, 73 yards. It felt like every time Anthony Miller caught the ball today, Nick, it was an impactful play, whether it be moving the sticks on third down or what have you. What did you see from Anthony? Because I said it early on this game, that I would not be opposed if this is one of those random awesome games that we get to see from number 17. And I wouldn't say that today was like one of his biggest breakout types of games, but to me, the 8 catches, 73 yard looks really good on the box score, but I do think it was the impact that those 8 catches had that may have a little bit more weight than really what it just looks like.
Yeah, and I think it's what he's good at is creating separation, Will. And when even look, what set up Cairo Santos' 51-yard field goal attempt was that big third down reception by Anthony Miller. It was short of the sticks, but it gave Cairo Santos enough to hit that 51-yard field goal. So to go back to your point, when he makes these catches, yeah, he can make catches in big moments most of the time, I would say. He did have a drop also in this game, but I would say overall, I liked what I saw from Anthony Miller. And if they lock up Robinson and Darnell Mooney's not there in a deep shot, where however they're using him on that given play, absolutely it should be Anthony Miller. It should be Robinson, Miller, then Mooney. I know Mooney's been impressing us, but it really how it should be is Robinson, Miller, then Mooney. That's what I really do believe, even given Anthony Miller's up and down season so far. But seeing this, he can create separation against Gardner Johnson, who was on him a lot of the game, and that's where this whole I think that Wims thing kind of started. Seeing what happened there, but he can make guys look just silly out there. And like you said, it did happen on some of the bigger moments in the game where he caught some of those receptions. And hopefully, maybe this is the first of the 3-game spurt that we're going to see from Anthony Miller, right? So hopefully it is. The Bears need it. Clearly, they do.
I mean, my late grandma, she always told me that everything good or bad happens in threes. And if this is the start, I mean, we need a very strong November now more than ever. Sitting at 5-3. I mean, it was 6 days ago we were sitting there at 5-1. Now we're down 5-3. I mean, this is the skid that we were kind of fearing here, Nick. But no one would be upset if this is Miller's first of his big 3 here in a row. But I was very pleased with his production today. As aggravated as I've been with him for the better part of the last month and a half. And hopefully he can continue to ball out a little bit. I thought he was someone that I felt like Foles was looking at a little bit more on third down than I anticipated heading in this game. And we'll see if that continues. Someone that you already kind of expressed some vocal frustration about going up against his former team, Jimmy Graham. I'll take all of it that I can so far in this postgame show, but I had him as my predicted MVB. 2 catches, 13 yards on 7 targets, and I've been trying to scratch my head trying to figure out what the heck was happening. And it seemed like a lot of drop balls, and on top of that, he didn't seem as fiery and as passionate as we've seen him out there. It seemed a little flat, and you said earlier, if I remember you correctly, and you can definitely let me know if I was wrong in my assessment of what you said, but poor route running?
Yeah, I would say that it seems like to me for some reason when Jimmy Graham, when he's not in the end zone, it's not – I don't want to ever question a guy's effort, but it just doesn't seem like he finishes the route. When you're supposed to go through the middle of the field and keep on going to where you're trying to create separation from whoever's in coverage, it's like Jimmy Graham kind of waits. And even when he did run a good enough route, not a great route, but a good enough to get the ball hits him in the hands or into the chest and bounces off, and you see some of those drops, and that's why he only had 2 receptions on 7 targets. But I just don't – when he's outside the red zone, I think the impact for Jimmy Graham drastically reduces. It really does, just because he's not that guy that he once was. And we talked about it going into the season. He's had a really good season when he's been in the red zone. Outside of that, we haven't seen anything from Jimmy Graham, and this game truly exemplified that feeling I have of him, where if it's not inside the 20, man, Jimmy Graham is I don't want to say a liability, but he just doesn't got it. He's not one of those guys that you shouldn't be looking to this guy on third down. Like, that shouldn't be the thing. It should be more of an Anthony Miller Robinson, those kind of things.
We've had games where he's been productive on third down. That's, to me, not the worst case scenario. Today it was. Today it wasn't his kind of game, and I'm confused by it. Between him, Cole Kmet, obviously the Bears got our memo that we priority sent via USPS over to Hallis Hall about get Demetrius Harris out of the snap share, out of the target share. He's not on the box score today, but Cole Kmet, 1 catch, 2 yards. Jimmy Graham's 2 catches, 13. So between the three of them, you got 3 catches and quick math, 15 yards. That's not going to cut it. That no matter who you're facing. And the Saints was entering this week one of the worst defenses against tight ends. They have allowed 6 touchdowns to the position, a decent amount of yards, no matter who they're facing each and every week. And the Bears, unfortunately, couldn't find much production out of them. And you look at a game with a few missed opportunities on some just drives. If tight ends can step up, you never know how this game could have been maybe flipped in the other direction. But today, Jimmy Graham was a liability. Today, Cole Kmet, I'm happy that the refs decided that this is the week that they'll count forward progress, at least for us. I know they didn't count it on Monday night against the Rams on that one call, but for us, they counted it. And luckily, because that could have been an easy fumble for the Saints to pick up as well. And outside of that, the tight end position, which is one that they put a lot of investment in this offseason, again, 3 catches, 15 yards. Definitely not what you're hoping to see out of them at all. Is there anything else about the Bears passing game that you want to talk about? We talked about early with the ability to use some misdirection, some motion, which allowed to some easy yards underneath when they needed to push the ball. And we usually went to Allen Robinson in the clutch moment, which is really no surprises for us as well. On top of that, Anthony Miller, David Montgomery had a couple clutch catches, and outside of that, it was pretty much non-existent.
Yeah, no, definitely was. You know, to go back to the tight ends, the best play that Jimmy Graham had was when he was targeted in the red zone, drew that pass interference call. The Bears, of course, could not rush it in the first 2 attempts, right? Because that's the Bears' offense. They just can't do things easy. But Darnell Mooney gets his touchdown pass to the right corner of the end zone. But that was the best play you saw from Jimmy Graham all night, drawing the PI. And, he got past the linebacker, and it was a high-pointed ball back in the end zone. That's where Jimmy Graham's good at. I'll give him that. And for the most part, he's been really good at that part all season. And I think there was an opportunity. I forgot what was the end result on the play, but Jimmy Graham, and again, I think it was Troy Aikman, Joe Buck, we're talking about it a little bit, where Jimmy Graham's kind of looking. He's got one-on-one coverage, use that big body, back left corner in the end zone, and the ball wasn't thrown that way. I think Nick Foles just takes a sack. But, yeah, don't really want to, again, harp on anything or too much on the Bears passing offense. It really wasn't there today, and a lot of factors play into that. But, yeah, it's still work to be done, Will.
I saw someone, ask in the chat, isn't the tight end the focal point of this offense? Yeah, it's supposed to be. That's what we've been told over the years. And outside of, honestly enough, Trey Burton back in 2018, really haven't seen that. And for me, living in the Colts TV market, I saw his touchdown earlier today, which is a little bit more salt in the wounds. But Nick, let's kind of flip it over to the Bears running game. Primarily, it went to David Montgomery, 21 carries, 89 yards. Outside of that, only 2 carries for the rest of the team. 1 for Patterson for 4, another one for Trubisky for 3. Patterson's biggest play of the game was that 38-yarder where Jason Spriggs, who came into right tackle, kind of helped open up a big hole. And David Montgomery's looking around like, wait, no one's hitting me? Like, he looks so surprised. And it had me laughing on the chair watching this game because we haven't seen that. And I was excited for it. And I don't think David Montgomery expected to actually have an open hole to run through either, because he's looking left, he's looking right, he's looking behind him. He's like, there's no way there's someone not right up on me, right? And luckily for him, he was wrong, but just seeing him look all over the field had me laughing again, picking up almost a third of his yards on the ground that one play. But I guess I would give it to Nagy for one thing today, and that is sticking to the run game more than we have seen so far this season. 21 carries for David Montgomery, 89 yards. Again, maybe the per average isn't where we would like it, where we would need it, but he didn't ditch it. And this is against a Saints run defense that was top 5 in the NFL in terms of yards per carry allowed. And despite being down for the majority of this game, 60% of your starting offensive line, he didn't shy away from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Will. And I think with David Montgomery, you even heard Troy Aikman saying it multiple times throughout the broadcast, just how good how good of a running back he could be, and what he's able to do, like gaining 2 yards on these tough run, these plays where you're not supposed to be getting any yards, given how the run blocking is set up for this Bears offense. And I think David Montgomery, he's capable of it, Will. It's so unfortunate that his first 2 seasons he's had offensive lines that just can't block, don't know how to execute in the scheme, a multitude of things. But David Montgomery's a good running back. I don't care what anyone says. We just haven't seen it all come to fruition because he's putting everything he has to get 1 to 2 yards every single time. Are there times where he misses a hole? Yes. Are there times where he doesn't block maybe a blitzer as effectively as he should? Absolutely. But you can't tell me that David Montgomery isn't good, because we see how hard he works and what he can be. Just get some darn blocking. You put him behind any other offensive line probably, and the Bears have to be the dead last, and then give him the 31st ranked offensive line, see what he can do there, because I'm willing to bet it's more than what he's producing here. And it was great to see him burst out for a big one. And yeah, I was laughing too when I saw him looking around like, where are the guys at? It's supposed to have like multiple arms around me, dragging me by, everywhere. But that was good to see.
It was nice. Unfortunately, it's way far too often we get to see plays like that. I mean, that was the biggest hole we probably had to run through all season long. And speaking of the offensive line, how would you grade their day? Just considering everything that they're going up against versus all the different variables that were kind of thrown at them, with losing their right tackle, losing their backup right tackle, and having to flex some people around and then move them back. And I don't know, it's with offensive line, your biggest opponent, besides the one that you perhaps play against every Sunday, is consistency or the lack thereof. And unfortunately for the Chicago Bears team, they have not been able to have much of that up front.
Yeah, it's man, that's a tough question, Will. How would I grade them? And given everything they had to go through, and seeing that there were plays that worked actually in this offense today. There were some ones that worked, and Rashad Cowher's blocking, so I'm surprised any plays really work given how he's played and him having to go to right tackle, left guard, like all these different positions. So I think I'd give him like a B-, surprisingly, Will. Maybe that's way too generous, but we've seen this offensive line play worse, and they didn't play like great or good tonight. It was just they did average and maybe a little bit below that. But given what they had to deal with, yeah, I give them like a B-, which is, I don't know if it's generous, but I just don't think that you can grade them that harshly for given what they were dealing with.
Okay, I get you there. Another tough question. We were very, very vocal about Matt Nagy and his play calling this week, and we're not the only ones. Would you say he held us back again today, or was it more on the execution side?
That's another tough. Well, let's go back to the halftime adjustments, third quarters. Like that's where I think this whole entire that lead started to disappear. Well, it was gone. The Saints took over, right? And that's on Nagy. That's on the halftime adjustments not being made or not making the correct ones and just being outcoached and things of that nature. But I'm trying to think. We liked what we saw in spurts with more of the motion, more of the misdirection, the play action, the deep plays, committing to the run. Like at halftime, it was 11 rushes to 14 passes. We like that. And I think that's what the Bears need to have, some kind of balance. So the first half was good, but the third quarter, things got out of hand. And if you let that happen throughout a game, you almost lose it, given that you know that this offense can't consistently put up points, but yet you're kind of letting it happen in that third quarter where things, like I said, start to get out of hand again. So I would say it is on coaching a little bit. I would put it. Man, I can't even give you a straightforward answer, Will, because I think it's a tough one. I think this is a team loss, to be completely honest. I can't put it all on Nagy. I can't put it all on Foles. I can't put it all on the O-line. So I'll put it on all of them. They equally take the blame for this one. I think that's really just given how this game played out, what it should be.
Yeah, I think they're equal parts no matter where you're looking in this game, where one unit or one positional group or coaching or just the offense in general kind of let us down. I mean, again, there are times where even the defense did as well, and we're going to talk about them here soon, but there are also times where they were definitely not getting much help from the other elements, whether it's special teams, whether it's offense here in this game. But for me, Nick, I asked Bears fans before this game started, the Rams, going back a week, the Saints were the worst third down teams and also one of the worst red zone teams and on defense. And someone told it pretty straight in Twitter. They're like, well, I don't really trust the Bears to get to the red zone, so why would I have much faith they could take advantage of a bad red zone defense? And again, only 2 trips in the red zone for this Bears offense, to me, at the end of the day, still looms very large and shows, unfortunately, still their incapability of moving the ball, establishing drives, even against some of these, I'll call weaker defenses than so far we have seen over the last 2, 3, 4 weeks here over the course of this season. Whether it be a bad quarterback play in a drive, offensive line play in the following one, or some coaching and some play calling decisions, time management decisions on another. It really does kind of fall on everyone's shoulders here, there, and everywhere in between. Anything else on the Bears offense you want to discuss, Nick, before we move on to the third quarter of our postgame show?
I'm just curious to see what this offense looks like next week. Who's going to be playing? Because it seems like it's just a carousel of guys just coming in and out different positions, and it's a week-to-week thing. Maybe Cody Whitehair comes back and that maybe provides some stability, but even he wasn't playing that great. So we'll see what it looks like next week against the Titans. So be an interesting thing to keep an eye on.
I'll say this, as worried as I was about center Sam Mustipher, and he didn't have a perfect game by any means, but he definitely wasn't as large of a liability as I think many fans, including myself, was thinking, coming into this game. Did you kind of come away with that same sense?
Yeah, honestly, seeing a guy make his first career start against a good opponent versus Saints, like, when is the bad snap going to happen? When's going to be the miscue where he's the only guy that hasn't moved and the entire offensive line has? Or like some of those blatant mistakes. You didn't see that from Sam Mustipher. I'm sure when we go back, watch NFL Game Pass and see, we're going to see some missed blocks. Of course it's going to happen. It's the Bears offensive line. But yeah, I would say he held his own for a first career start, and I think you'll take that given what this Bears offensive line has looked like all season.
All right, Nick, with all of this, let's go ahead, take a breath, move over to this Chicago Bears defense that allowed 394 total yards today, 5.5 yards per play, 272 through the air, 122 on the ground. And before we kind of dive into positions and players and everything of that nature, like we usually do, what's some of your just bigger picture takeaways from this unit as we're now, 45 or so minutes away from the end of this game? What's kind of sticking to your mind that you want to discuss?
I think this, something that I said earlier, the Bears defense played good enough for this team to win. For another offense to have their defense, they would have taken advantage of some of the situations they were in. When the Saints are starting at their own that 50-yard line, or in advantage them in terms of the territory, and they only come away with 3 points, you'll take that from the Bears defense. And I think for the majority of the game, they played well enough. Now, I don't like what we saw at the end of halftime, these big plays kind of happening. The whole is Khalil Mack supposed to really cover Alvin Kamara out of the back?
Oh my gosh, I hated that play call so bad.
That was, I think they ended up saying that it was Deshaun Gibson, Khalil Mack. There was some kind of confusion there, but anytime where Khalil Mack has to go, cover any running back, it shouldn't be the thing. That's not what he does. He's obviously one of the best defensive players in football, but no, never again. That should be destroyed, burned, and just gone from the defensive playbook forever.
Yeah, no, so Nick,
that one kind of thing.
That one hurt, man. I mean, Mac's been dealing with an ankle, and he's been very limited as it is. Kamara entered the game leading the NFL in scrimmage yards, and I mean, I'll admit, that's one of my favorite plays in Madden, honestly. You get the running back on the angle route. I mean, I tried implementing that in my middle school league and playing against a lot of 4-4 defenses that kind of just hog the middle of the field. Never worked. But whenever you're running a man defense, and honestly, that play would have been difficult to defend if it was, Gibson knew that was his guy from the get-go, or even if it was Roquan Smith's guy, and Roquan's standing right there as the Mike backer in the middle of the field. That's still very tough to defend because as a linebacker, you're kind of holding your ground. Running back runs past your face, and you have to pick up your speed in a hurry. Khalil Mack dropped back from his stance on the line, and he kind of shaded towards the outside, a little bit towards the flat. And Kamara did the angle route, and he cut towards the middle of the field. And for Mack, who's backpedaling and shifting over, I think it was technically to his right, and Kamara crosses his face to the left in the middle of the field, you have to turn on a dime quick. And that's when your ability to accelerate out of the break and go 0 to 100 is really put to the test. And Khalil Mack's great at rushing the passer, but he's not someone who's supposed to be guarding a player like Kamara out in space like that. He doesn't have that kind of explosiveness and that kind of burst, in particular when you're nursing an ankle injury. So for that play to put Mack on an island versus Kamara, shame on Chuck Pagano. On top of that, kudos to Sean Payton. Great play call at the right time. Who knows? It could have been an adjustment that Breeze made at the line of scrimmage as well. But it really did look like Mack was going to be pressuring on that play per usual, and then he kind of dropped back. So whatever that was, that play really hurt. It led to some points for the Saints, but like you, Nick, that one frustrated me. At no point whatsoever did I feel good about it when I saw Khalil Mack drop back 3 to 4 steps, kind of shade out towards the sideline as I was watching Kamara get into a route and kind of get on his break. And I was holding my breath, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, it was it's still, I think I was talking to somebody on Twitter about it where when I saw him, like, what's Roquan Smith doing? But then I got clarification on it, but still came back like, why is that even being called in the first place? If you're trying to disguise something, great. Yeah, you have to do things like that, but never again. Khalil Mack shouldn't do that again. Let him do what he does best. Go get after the quarterback. And I'm glad you mentioned the ankle injury because there's a bunch of disadvantages on the play. Credit to the Saints for calling that on the perfect time where Mack is in coverage there because it obviously hurt the Bears there for a big, big play to Kamara.
No, it sure did. When I'm looking at this Bears defense overall, I thought, to hold this Saints offense in overtime to only 26 points is a win. They've been scoring about 30 points on average, and this is the third time they've been held under 30 this season. And on top of that, they did a good job, as we've seen all year, of bend but not break. And of course, there were some instances where they did break, but unlike the last game, I thought the Bears did a better job of getting the Saints into third down earlier in drives, which was a big issue that I had against the Rams, that the Bears defense was unable to do that. They were able to kind of recoup that here just a little bit. But, Nick, when it comes to the Rams, I keep going back a week. When it comes to the Saints being able to put up points, again, I pointed it out when we talked about the offense. In the third quarter, a lot of short fields were given up here, unfortunately, for this Bears defense, allowing 6 points on only, I dotted it on 26 yards, so I can't really fault them for that. Outside of that, what kind of led to some of these longer drives, some of these points that when we get back to the drawing board looking into next week against the Titans that you want to kind of see start to get cleaned up?
Well, I just didn't understand about the touchdown plays that, went to Cook, the tight end. That was with, who was that? Jalen Johnson in coverage. I think the Taysom Hill touchdown. There was just such soft coverage on some of these plays where you're wondering, well, why is that the type of defense you want to play given the situation? It just didn't make sense on there. It was just too easy. It was just so wide open, and obviously 14 points on plays where there's defenders are not even close. And this Bears defense was pretty much rallying to the ball carrier all game, but on 2 plays where they're playing such soft coverage, I just didn't understand that. So obviously that needs to be cleaned up, be addressed, and talked about in the meetings this upcoming week. Is this why is there such soft coverage? And you're giving the middle of the field. You're just giving it to them, and there's just not the safety support there that you're thinking should be there, or maybe again it's just not good one-on-one coverage from Jalen Johnson. I think it was to Sean Gibson on the play, so it just didn't make sense. And obviously 14 points, that's take those. Maybe they're only field goals if you don't give up those, and we're talking about a completely different result here. But yeah, when those plays happen, and I'm wondering where is the closest guy, why is that happening? And that's just what I kept on thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Nick, when you only allow 4 touchdown passes through the air entering this week, and Taysom Hill is one of them that you allow continuing on out. Now it's 6 on the year after this game, but it's like, oh, it's so deflating. Like, there's no way skill-wise he should be able to have a difference against this defense as a receiver. And, I mean, he found his way as a runner, which did that frustrate you as it did me? Every time he was taking a snap, like you just knew he was running with that football, and he was able to pick it up and get some very vital, gains there to move the sticks. Because for me, every time I saw him as a quarterback, I was like, well, he's not running it. He's not passing it. He's going to run it. And the Bears, unfortunately, were unable to even make much of a play on that as well. And what makes me kind of frustrated more about it is the fact that I know he's an X factor each and every week, but Nick, we didn't really talk about him too much in either our Meet the Opponent episode or our game preview show.
Yeah, no, we didn't. And maybe I don't know if that's just on us for not, giving him his time is due, but yeah, it seemed when he was in the game, it's like, okay, Taysom Hill's gonna get it. And the Bears just had no answer to stop. And I think that's where when you have a good offensive line, like a defense can know what's coming and just not be able to block it or to get in the way and fill the gaps effectively because you have good run blockers. And that's why a guy like Taysom Hill is able to take advantage of that. He's not like moving and making people. He's taking what the offensive line's giving him and just hitting the hole and getting his 7-8 yards on a third down conversion. I think that was the first one of the game or close to it. So it's not like he's doing, or Sean Payne's even doing complex things in that aspect when he's on the field. It's pretty, I would say common, and the Bears just couldn't stop it. So we talked about this defensive front, and it's had its problems stopping the run, and when we need them to kind of show up when he was or when it was Kamara, Miller, whoever, Latavius Murray, sorry. They just couldn't get there in position to make those stops. And we've kind of seen that all season when it came to stopping the run.
Okay, so inability to stop the run, which I'm honestly pleased that you're able to keep Kamara as limited as he was. I mean, he finished with a lot of total yards today between his 96 receiving and 67 on the ground. I mean, that's 150 plus total yards from scrimmage, but he also entered the game leading the NFL in that regard, and that doesn't overly surprise me. I think what surprised me a little bit, I know the Saints have been good at protecting Drew Brees all season, though, was only 1 sack, and on top of that, only 2 quarterback hits. Really were unable to generate a lot of pressure. So, Nick, 2-part question. 1, did that surprise you? And B, how impactful was that throughout this game?
Yeah, because I thought the Bears were close on a couple of those opportunities where you're thinking Drew Brees is going to go down, and they just couldn't hit home. And it is a good, I would say it's a good offensive line, but still, it's like the way this front has been playing, maybe not in particular like on Monday night, but for the 2 previous games, they were getting after the quarterbacks, right? But they just couldn't bring that to happen against the Saints. And I think we need to start talking about Robert Quinn and really, well, where is he? Where's the impact? This guy that they paid yeah, exactly. Who? The big ticket free agent yardage on whether it was a run play or pass play, whatever it may have been. But Roquan Smith was flying sideline to sideline, and just playing coverage on a guy that's hard to cover, to be completely honest. And when he's down the sidelines, I know Drew Brees gets hit on the play, he's not able to complete the ball, but Roquan Smith is right there down the right sideline covering a guy that gives a lot of people trouble. So honestly, it was just a fun matchup to watch more than anything. So I look, maybe 50-50, but it was something that was really, really close and a good matchup between, I think, 2 good players.
Yeah, some people were saying that our stream kind of stopped. I guess the same time that my microphone issue was kind of happening. So If the stream did stop for you, I apologize for that. I kind of picked it up here on my own. And Nick and I, we've still been talking about this Bears defense, venting about Robert Quinn. Just kind of switched over to Roquan Smith versus Alvin Kamara as well. And hopefully the technology plays nice for us as we kind of finish up this post-game show. A little bit more than the Bears did for us so far today. But Nick, is there anything else on this Bears defense, good, bad, ugly, otherwise, that you want to make sure we talk about?
Yeah, I do want to talk about something that has been mentioned before with this Bears defense and why it's not the 2018 defense, and that's just capitalizing on potential turnovers. Roquan Smith was in a position right there against Cook late in the game. I don't know if that was overtime yet. No, it's overtime. It was the 2nd and 12 play. Roquan Smith is right there, Will. He maybe get away with pulling on Cook's jersey, but he gets in front of that pass from Drew Brees and easily could have intercepted it. And then Eddie Jackson, look, we've seen Eddie Jackson make some incredible plays, and that one where he jumps the route towards the right sideline, yeah, he can easily make that interception as well, but they both didn't. The Bears end up losing. The field goal, the game-winning field goal eventually happens. But those are plays from, I would say, the 2018 defense collectively as a whole. They make those plays because that's just the type of year they were having. 2020, where you see these times where they're elite, and then these times where they're like, okay, they're a good unit. That, I don't know, maybe those two plays are emblematic of what this season's been like. They're there, but they don't finish. And I don't want to put really a lot of blame on this defense because they're the only reason that Bears are in any of the games they play. But we've seen those two guys just make those plays in the past, and they didn't make them today against the New Orleans Saints. So that's just another point I wanted to bring up.
You wouldn't say that the Bears defense was out there too much today, right? I mean, I saw that a few times in the chat, but when you come down to it, the time of possession was only 2 minutes in favor of the Saints over the Bears offense. And I know that the Bears, unfortunately, were put in some bad positions, like we said on the top of the show, with some very short yardage, but I wouldn't say the Bears defense was out there too much, or if it was in terms of too much based off of what the offense was unable to do. If anything, they had a hard time getting off the field in some drives.
Yeah, no, I would say for the defense, like they were put in some bad positions where they have, again, coming out of halftime, that's where these bad positions start for the defense because of what the Bears offense is doing. But yeah, in terms of what you were saying, time of possession, it was only 2 minutes difference. So the actual time wasn't, but it seemed like, I guess, the opportunities they were in makes it seem worse than what it was, if that makes sense, Will. But yeah, I wouldn't say that the Bears defense was out there too long. Not this game. Most games, yes, that is the case. No doubt about it. But this one in particular, I wouldn't say that was the reason.
Okay. I don't think I have too much more here on this Bears defense. I mean, the Saints are only 2 of 13 on third down. And I want to make sure I mention this because, this Bears defense has been lights out on third down all year long. Secondly, the Saints entered this game with the NFL's best red zone, well, one of the best red zone offenses, but they did also enter the game with the best third down offense in the NFL, and the Bears only allowed them to score on 2 out of 13 third downs. And it's real funny, Nick, that it's yet another game where I'm curious, is it lack of fear of the Bears offense, or is it just pure necessity of going up against this Bears defense where teams feel like they have to go for it on fourth down each and every week against this Bears? I think I saw a graphic on the Saints' first fourth down conversion that they only went for it 4 times all year. And they ended up going for it 3 times in this game alone. And I feel like it's starting to be, as much as it's shade against this Bears offense because you don't fear them, and that's totally understood, but I also think it's necessity going up against this Bears defense that is so lights out on third down. You almost need that extra down to perhaps even extend your drives.
Yeah, that could definitely be it. I honestly just believe that teams are looking at the offense on the other side like, let's go for it. They're not going to do anything even if we don't get it. Like, we can, they turn over the ball on, hypothetically, they're 5. They're only going to get to the 4 and have to kick a field goal or something like that. So I think it really is just the lack of respect for the Bears offense. And, hey, teams should be looking at it like that until the Bears prove they can do something. and capitalize on plays, then why not get an extra down and utilize it? It's tough against this Bears defense. You're going to make every down tough, but yeah, I would, if I'm an opposing team, I will look at to take a little bit more fourth down opportunities than you would normally.
All right. Well, hey, there you go. I mean, I think it's maybe a combination of the two. Again, this Bears defense is one of the best on third down. I think second in the NFL entering this week. And if that's the case, teams are going to have to go for it on fourth if they want to have much of a life force. But Nick, before we jump into the fourth quarter of our show, talk about special teams and kind of wrap things up, you want to make sure to let people know how they can help support us as we kind of move forward. I know did you get your green screen over the weekend, by the way?
I did get my green. I started opening it today and it looked too complex, so I saved it for later in the week. I did get that. And again, this goes to what you guys help us with and just sending in these donations. And of course, if you guys send us a donation, we'll give you a shout out on the preview podcast. So here's how you can make this happen. Real quick reminder, if you want to support the podcast in any means possible, you can send us a donation through Venmo or PayPal. For Venmo, the account is at the Chicago Audible. You should see my name and the Chicago Audible logo. And on PayPal, that's www.chicagoaudible.com/PayPal. Like Will was saying, we got a green screen. We have some fun things that we're thinking of trying here. I just got to get things actually set up on my end, and it should be good to go. But from the software, the lighting, the microphones, these headphones, like all this is through your guys' help in making this show happen. So if you want to, get a shout out and help us out, you can do that by sending us a donation. And one last time on Venmo, that's at the Chicago Audible. And on PayPal, it's www.chicagoaudible.com/PayPal.
I know we got a couple of super chats in this show, which is awesome. I'm going to go back. You're going to get a shout out on our preview show. Unfortunately, I can't scroll far enough upstream in terms of our comments because there's so many live viewers to find out who you were to give you those shout outs. So if you're like, hey, I want one, those do come in our preview shows. So keep an eye out for that as well. And I want to thank everyone who has donated. And also, we are in episode, like 513, 514, something like that. And I've been waiting to send out these thank you cards over the last couple of weeks. And the card stock I had these bad boys printed on. It was back ordered. Finally came in here on Saturday. I wrote a bunch and sending them out over on Monday, although I'm sure that the United States Postal Service is going to be swamped this week. There's probably more important mail than just our thank you cards, but if you emailed us, tweeted us, Facebooked us, however you reached out for your thank you card and you've been wondering, hey, where is it? Just got the stuff in the mail, finally, writing those out, sending them out this week. So keep your eyes peeled in your inbox, whether that's here in the United States or also abroad, as there are a good chunk of you across the world that requested yours as well. And I mentioned I would not shy away from having to pay some international postage to get you a pretty awesome looking Chicago Audible thank you card. And so with that, thanks everyone who has donated. Look forward to giving plenty of shout outs here for our preview show. And let's go ahead, Nick, and move into the fourth quarter of our show. And let's talk about special teams, and let's talk about Dwayne Harris. His first punt return went from 12 yards, which was the longest of the season for us. And hooray, Ted Ginn Jr. is deactivated from the active roster. And on top of that, a double hooray for Dwayne Harris, giving us a punt returner. And even the returns that he wasn't getting a ton of yards, him actually fielding a punt and falling forward and not allowing the thing to bounce 15, 20 yards backwards, which was just such an awesome sight to see. And you kind of forget how important or even just how much you do need some of those plays until you kind of see them happen.
No, absolutely. When seeing Dwayne Harris get underneath the punt and actually catch it, that was great to see. I'm not going to lie. You hadn't seen that from Ted Ginn Jr. And when we saw that he was inactive, obviously going into today's game, it's like, well, good, because it was about time. They have a guy that's willing to catch these punts. And 12, Will, when you said that 12 yards was the longest one they had, I know Ted Ginn Jr. was the guy back there, but man, that was surprising to hear. That's going to change, I think, with him back there. And I'm not saying he's like the game changer or anything, but he's just he's willing to do it. He's willing to actually get underneath the punt, and it's not that obviously the easiest thing to do on a football field, to look straight up in the air while guys are going down at full speed to hit you, but he's willing to do that. And he was also on the kickoff team, and I saw that like right away. It's like, man, this guy just got signed a couple of days ago, and he's already making his mark on special teams. That was great to see.
Yeah, no, he was more than less all over the field in the third phase. I saw Sherrick McManus back today as well, and he didn't have big impactful plays, but I think he ended the game healthy, which for us I think is a big win for someone that's been dealing with injuries all season long. And for all of the wind that took place today, and there were between both teams 8 field goals made, and on our side, every single one of them went between the uprights, including the 51-yarder from Cairo Santos. So Nick, I know we've been talking about Santos really solidifying his spot here as the Bears kicker, and I think another outing like this with the elements kind of helps take that and just cement it just a little bit more. Is there anything else on the third phase that you want to make sure we discuss today? I thought that just Dwayne Harris himself and not being Ted Ginn Jr. was enough for us. And also, did you notice that it was a D. Harris that was returning punts for each team?
I did not notice that until you pointed it out. So now I do. But one last thing to mention, obviously Cordell Patterson did not have the game I was expecting. My bold prediction, 2 kickoff return touchdowns. That did not happen for Cordell Patterson. He did have a delay game on his end on one of the punts. That's just how that one drive was going for the Bears. Everything that could go wrong was going wrong. But, yeah, it wasn't the impactful day for Cordell Patterson in any aspect that I was kind of expecting for today's game.
All right, let's move on to our, let's call an audible, Nick. In this segment, each and every week, we kind of look at a moment of the game, one that we would take back and maybe have a do-over on or change it up. For me, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Nick Foles' interception here with the game tied at 13-13. Forced to throw. One of those that we've talked about that you feel like you see one of those a week from Nick, and unfortunately that gave the I keep going back a week. The Saints the ball at the Bears 39 inside the Bears territory, which allowed them to take the lead. And I think a game like this, where each point counts, every short field matters, and we talked about the Bears defense had to face a few of those, or maybe more than we would ever like to see in any given game, even though we expect them. That interception at the point hurt me, I think, the most out of all the negative plays I saw today. So that's going to one I wish I can take back. But how about you? If you can call an audible, what would it be?
Man, this is a tough one. I was going to say the Nick Foles interception, but I'm looking at the one drive where they start. It's at Chicago's 43-yard line, and it ends up being a 5-play, 21-yard drive. But on third down, they're in a 3rd and 6. Not the best, but it's not definitely the worst third down situation to be in. But you have the false start by Jimmy Graham. You go to 3rd and 11. Nick Foles ends up completing a pass to Anthony Miller. They end up going for it on 4th down. It's a 4th and 5 at that moment in time. They don't convert. It's at the New Orleans 36. Takes them out. No points on the board, obviously. The next possession, the Saints get the ball. They capitalize on that and turn it into a touchdown. It's those simple plays. As simple as not moving before the ball is snapped. And that's Jimmy Graham, a veteran player. And so, I mean, that would be the one play I would change. The Bears most likely don't even get anything out of this drive, just given the offense and how it's played. But see what they can do on a 3rd and 6. And they had the mindset they were going for it on 4th down anyway. Maybe pick up 3 yards. You have to pick up 2 with the running game of David Montgomery. Who knows? But it was all taken away because you go to 3rd and 11. You have to complete a shorter pass in a 4th down and 5. Bears don't get it. And again, like I said, the next possession for the Saints, they end up scoring a touchdown to make the lead 23-13 at that point. And game kind of got out of reach as we would come to see.
Yeah, luckily for us, they came back, but overtime kind of turned things the other way. To wrap things up, Nick, I'm curious who is going to be our MVB so far in this game. I got not so far. The game's over. Who's going to be your MVB for the Bears here in Week 8? And I'll let you go first.
You know what? I really liked how Roquan Smith played today. Well, I think given the matchup with Alvin Kamara, and seeing that it was maybe like 50-50 in terms of who was winning some of these matchups, and seeing that he was flying all over the field. He should have had an interception that would have changed the game, obviously, completely if he does over there in overtime, but he was reading screens. He was filling lanes. Like he was active, and that's the Roquan Smith you want to see. It really is. And just given his game overall against a team that's not easy to play against, especially given the two running backs in the backfield, I'll give it to Roquan Smith.
You're going to go Roquan Smith. You're going to go defense, which I think is 110% deserving. I'll flip it around. I'm going to go ahead and I'm torn between two offensive players. I'll give it to David Montgomery, just because I thought he was able to get more on the ground than so far we've seen. Maybe they should go to Matt Nagy for actually running with him more than we've seen so far this season. But I thought Montgomery, whether it be the early third down pickup, the big 38-yarder that we saw in this game as well, and there are a few other big-time runs for him. I was very excited by what I saw. Could have easily went A-Rob too, but especially with that touchdown. But I want to give some love to David Montgomery. I think he deserves it. I think a lot of fans are getting soured on him. I was frustrated after the last game, even though I know offensive line is not helping us really too often as well. So for me, I'll give it to Montgomery. Didn't get up any points or anything like that, but he definitely helped this Bears offense move down the field, which it's had a hard time doing so far this season. But I like Roquan a lot. Big reason why he was my backbreaker matchup, and since you took him, I figured we'd flip the side of the field, and let's go ahead and talk about the Bears offense. And Robinson, heck, I mean, Mooney has some big catches as well, including his touchdown. Miller had the big ones, the clutch ones on third down that helped move the sticks. So not that I would say there's a lot of, quote, deserving players, but there are some players that were released in contention where, unlike last week, Nick, we're both kind of like, I don't know where this thing goes. So at least that's somewhat progress. But for now, Nick, let's go ahead and let's wrap things up today with our 2-minute warning, and let's close the show. So what's going to be your 2-minute warning?
Yeah, well, look, this was a 26-23 ball game. Bears lose their second one in a row to two NFC teams. So this loss does hurt the Bears, but look, they're still in contention for the NFC North. We saw the offense compared to the Monday night's game, I would say they did a lot of things that we want to continue to see from them. And we talked about that enough, where the motion, misdirection, big plays, we want to continue seeing that. Even establishing a little bit the run with David Montgomery. But we talked about the halftime. It was 11 runs to 14 passes. Continue that, Matt Nagy. And I know it's tough with the offensive line that's in front of Nick Foles right now, but there's still the same issues as well on that offense. And I think all these miscues on offense, these failed opportunities to maybe extend a lead or even to get points, that is affecting the defense. That has to do so much. And we talked about it. Well, they almost need to play perfect. They have to almost be elite on every single series to really give this Bears team a chance to win. And they weren't that today. They weren't even that today, and it was only a 3-point ball game. If the offense could just pick up its weight, or just to do average is all we're striving for, even a little bit below that, this Bears team would be in so much better of a position. The Saints are no pushover. I would say they haven't played their best ball, but you saw they were in it with one of the teams that's most likely going to be in a playoff position come the end of the season, right? And it was a close game, but and unless the Bears can fix maybe a few of those problems, I don't think they can fix all of them. They can't. I think there's just too many along this offense right now. They're going to be in more of these positions where it might have to go to overtime, but at least they'll be there at the end, and that's all you can really ask for. It's a loss. Obviously, we're not going to have that victory Monday. But we'll have to wait till next Sunday against the Titans. I'll say this, after this loss, I am feeling better than I was after Monday night's loss, because Monday night you couldn't take anything positive and take it to next week. This, you can take some positives into next week. Granted, you'd like to take some positives with the win. You could still find some positives in a loss, and I think this one you actually can, which is surprising. So I go a little bit more optimistic for this 2-minute warning, but I'll leave it at that and hand it over to you, Will.
Like you, I feel better than I did at the Monday night loss. Maybe it's earlier in the evening since we had an earlier kickoff, so we're not as tired on top of watching our team lose. But I do think there were, at least this game, was decided in, a last second kind of play in overtime where a week ago you can tell that things were pretty much a lost cause in the second half. And the Bears, even though they went down 10, they found a way to come back, found a way to tie it up. They kind of fought back today against a very good Saints team. So I think seeing that resiliency kind of show itself yet again does kind of bring a little bit more positivity to the loss. And again, if overtime goes a little bit of a different way where the offense does something after the defense starts overtime, getting the ball back, we can be talking about a Bears win. And if that's the case, I think our entire tune for the majority of the show would have been probably a little bit more positive and a little bit differently as well. And it would have been an ugly win, but an ugly win's better than an ugly loss. And we already know that one is for certain. But unfortunately, I think where I'm kind of sitting is, again, 6 days ago we were 5-1. And now we're sitting here at 5-3. And we have a very tough game coming up here against the Titans. The Bears showed yet again today that running backs can be a big difference maker against this offense. And Derrick Henry next week, probably gonna have a nightmare tonight, thinking about the game coming up, envisioning how the Bears are gonna kind of slow him down in Nashville a week from today. And it's a very important game. We just saw the Vikings before this Bears game kind of take things over to the Packers. I know it came down to a Hail Mary attempt at the end, and Green Bay ended up losing, but I think the Vikings showed that even though they're doing a fire sale and they're pretty much looking forward to their future, they're not going to make their game easy by any stretch of the means as well. So we have 2 big games before the bye, and if the Bears drop both of them, you're looking at 500 at the bye, and 500 at the bye after starting 5-1 is going to feel like hell. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but it's going to feel really, really bad, and hopefully the Bears don't get in that situation, but they have some tests in front of them in order to avoid that. And with the woes up front, whether it be Bobby Massey, Cody Whitehair, we already know James Daniels out for the year. Those can continue to really hurt us as we look forward. And this defense, I think, Nick, you pointed out, can't carry us to the same degree that the 2018 defense did. It's going to be up to this offense to find something more. And I don't think either of us have a lot of confidence that it can find that something more, at least consistently enough to make a real serious run at the 2020 season. And we'll talk about that here as we kind of look forward. Again, we're only halfway through, so we kind of reset some expectations and recalibrate as we kind of look forward. But for a team that was an ugly 5-1 team to now oh boy, were we going 5-3 team as quickly as it did? It kind of has me on my heels as I'm trying to figure out what kind of team we get to cover for the rest of this season. So that's going to be my 2-minute warning. I want to thank everyone who's here watching the live stream. I'm glad that it was able to kind of find itself back here after a little bit of technical difficulties. I want to make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't yet. That way you can watch each and every one of our shows when we go live. Make sure to rate, review our show on Apple Podcasts. That way you can help us find more Bears fans just like you. Up next, I know Nick and I are going to be beginning our homework, start looking at the game next Sunday against the Tennessee Titans. I think we're also looking at a mid-season report card type of episode this week, so definitely stay tuned for some bonus content from us here throughout the week. But Nick, it is now officially 2.5 hours until my birthday, and I'm a little sad after everything that we watched tonight. I was born during a Bears loss against the Vikings on Monday Night Football, and I'm going to be going to bed tonight with the Bears loss. So nothing changes after being on this planet now for almost 28 years, and I guess that's a life lesson in of itself. But I'm ready to look forward to next week. I don't know about you.
Yeah, hopefully they can change the direction in your mood by the end of the week come Sunday, and it'll take a while, but hopefully that's the case, Will. And just to say it here early, happy birthday, Will, and hopefully your week gets better from here.
Thank you. We will try. Thank you for the birthday wishes, man. We'll see how it all goes here on Monday. But thanks for everyone for tuning in again. Look out for some content from Mick and I throughout this week. In case you need the final score again, Bears lose 26-23 here in overtime against the New Orleans Saints. We're going to be looking on to the next half of our season here in just a couple short days. But until then, bear down, Chicago.